Before we come to another highlight, actually the final approach of the conference, I would like to welcome the capstone course from the German Staff College to the conference, to this high military forum. They flew in from the United States directly. The forum, under the title The Way Ahead, has the following objective: to identify future challenges facing the German armed forces in terms of joint and services capability build-up, as well as in attaining force development targets for 2032 in NDPP and CARD, to highlight collaborative projects with EU and NATO forces. And for this final agenda topic of the 20th Berlin Security Conference, I welcome our Congress President, MP Wolfgang Hellmich, who will chair the discussion. And I would like to thank the admirals and generals to mount their seats. So the discussion will be held by Vice Admiral Dr. Daum, the Chief of the Cyber and Information Domain Service, by Lieutenant General Alfons Mais, the Chief of the German Army, by Lieutenant General Dr. Ansgar Ries, the Deputy Chief of the German Air Force, by Lieutenant General Martin Scheleis, the Chief of the German Joint Support and Enabling Service, by Vice Admiral Kai Schönbach, the Chief of the German Navy, and last but not least, by Major General Medical Corps Dr. Norbert Weller, Chief of Staff of the German Armed Forces Joint Medical Service, HQ. Generals, Admirals, a warm welcome to this high-level military forum. And since I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate and extend my sincere gratitude for your continuous engagement here at the BSC and bringing the capability development of your service into life at the capability launches. Congress President Hellmich, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wolski. So you have declared all the names, all what persons we have sitting here, the crème de la crème of the German armed forces in the different domains, new domains, old domains, but they all, the people who have to lead in her domains, the development to the future. And that's the topic of this round of discussion, the way ahead. Now I've heard Mr. Wolski, if he will discuss all the topics he has, like he said, in the next 1 hour, we can use 2, 4, 6 hours for all these topics. So this is the artificial point to put it in a very short time. So let me start with round with this first question. The way ahead is not a bowl of glass. That are real decisions which are made every day. And we have, since the beginning of this year, the so-called Eckpunktepapier calls for the German armed forces to become the first responders with military capabilities for Article 5 operations in a hybrid and multi-domain operations scenario. So my question to you is, how can we establish national capabilities that are scalable and with a high state of readiness for the dimensions or the domains? I will begin on the right side. General Weller.
Well, I try to give a short answer to this complex question, because from my perspective, there are 2 headlines we have to from a medical perspective towards this question. First of all is a medical service for the future is purely, or has to go multinational. That's the first headline for me. The second one, and I must admit, it's a quote a member of my launch of this morning, is we have to synchronize medical services across the borders. What means across the border between military and civilian side, and between the different countries, in particular as far as the European color of the NATO is concerned. And there are, for me, beyond multinationality, three keywords. The firstly is not efficiency, but effectiveness. And at first, what means we have to look whether we have a proper relationship to the domains we have to support. The second one is some kind of resiliency, to be able to do that on the long way. The third one is that we have to be able to do with the common understanding of military medical health service between the participation nation. That is a short answer from the goal we are going for, and I think that leads in the direction of all the other domains or dimensions.
Admiral Schönbach.
Yeah, I would say in my case, from the naval perspective, it's a bit different. Now, just a couple of headlines, and I stay short as well. First of all, making available what we do already have, instead of waiting for maintenance. Really to accelerate the whole process, first of all. Second is, and this is, I think, as you see, and if you look not just at the new competitors, Russia as well, of course, but also China and Iran and other countries, we have to respond to the challenge what we see at sea. Instead of just building what we already have, that we just copying what we already have, we have to look at the challenges, at the threats. And with regard to the threats and really analyzing that, I think it is physics indeed, but it is not the big thing. We have to always look how do we correspond or how we to have responding to the threats at sea. So, and this is the reason, and this is the idea then building the right things or procuring the right things. And since we are from the beginning, from 1956, when we re-erected Navy, we are international as well. So we can look at our partners and allies, we see what they are doing, and from time to time it makes sense looking over the fence.
General Schillers.
First of all, we have to balance operational requirements and resources, and by all respect and understanding, to be more effective, we also must be efficient because resources are scarce. We have built up an imbalance over the years when we focus on out-of-area operations, international crisis management. Now we are going back to look at Article 5 collective defense. We need to be more robust, but we have to enhance the supporting and enabling capabilities who have been weighed too light over the past 2 decades or so. And therefore, I'm still convinced that we need to pool scarce resources in order to be able to put them to the center of gravity from the joint commander's perspective. That's one. Second, we also have to differentiate between the operations with a peer, high-intensity operations with a peer contender up front, but normally this is not in Germany, hopefully not. And from the national territorial defense commander's view, we need to look at the military capabilities that are needed in homeland. And due to the complexity of operations under hybrid conditions, we must really cooperate closely with our civilian partners. And again, we need supporting and enabling capabilities to ensure the functionality of this Germany as a strategic hub, as a pillar for the security and collective defense of Europe. So that would be my request: more jointness and a more balanced approach between the capabilities.
Thank you. General Rijks.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm close to Admiral Schönbach, first of all. We are in a new scenario. This scenario is hybrid. It is A2AD. It is collective defense. and possibly it is deterrence. And all that together brings some necessities for the capabilities which we have to develop and which we have to involve into our warfighting. And that is speed, that is power projection, and possibly its flexibility. And if you take this as a prerequisite we need, then of course an air force is needed which brings in these inherent capabilities, especially also in combination with space. And I think we have to discuss that in a nutshell together. A second idea concerning that is that we need each other. So we are combined. It is only possible to do a joint warfighting, and possibly later on we have to combine us in an idea which is then called dimensions from a German perspective. And third, we need to develop our forces and the capabilities more and more quickly, and that means in a spiral development. If we don't orient our processes, our structures, and especially also the capabilities to that spiral development, then we are far behind, and I think that is the key for the future.
General Mais.
Yeah, I'm representing the domain whose people, whose soldiers, are running the last 100 meters. And unfortunately, in my domain, we take the longest time to reach the last 100 meters. And to mitigate this disadvantage, for us, readiness is the utmost prerequisite to be effective in our domain. And this readiness requires cohesive, standing, full-fledged, equipped forces. We need the fire truck completely materialized and equipped and manned in the firehouse, and being able to leave when the fire bell or the alarm bell is ringing. And this requires an organized as you fight, really from the fighting capabilities to the enabling capabilities. For me, effectiveness has to be prioritized over efficiency, because efficiency was feasible during 2 decades of stabilization operations, where we were able to organize processes and had the ability to predict and planify everything well ahead, but these times are obviously over. For me, jointness is of utmost importance, and for me, jointness is the orchestration of the different effects in the different domains by the joint commander to achieve the strategic or the operational goal on the battlefield. And the bench line for me is that I want to send my people out to combat with the perspective to be victorious, to prevail on the battlefield and not only participate. Thank you.
Admiral Daum.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chairman. I think everything has been said, but not by everybody, so I need to recall everything. But I will concentrate on the fact that there is a difference in the challenges that we face as the services, and that is that in my service, we are, so to say, under fire already today. What we do today is 24/7 operating, securing the networks for the others and the administration system. And that is important because we are on a constant fire in the cyber arena. That's what we face. So we are on track with operating and securing, with intel activities and support, with geospatial support, so all what the others need. That is what we are doing, and also analyzing the information environment. So talking about scalable forces would mean, what would I need tomorrow? I'm more talking about what do I have today and how can I employ that best to the mission that we have. Of course, if we're talking about times of tension or even going to collective defense, then we also need to add some capabilities. We need to scale up the amount of staff that we would involve. The whole of government approach in peacetime, as of today, that's the important thing for me. And that, in addition to what the others have said, that is the additional piece that we want to add in that environment. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I've heard different words, combined, but also different. The same issues, the same challenges, the same threats. that needs to have the same roof. What I mean is, what joint commander structures do we need? Nationally and especially internationally? And how can we synchronize multi-domain operations in a national way, but also in the European way, or in the NATO? That's all different, but combined. Is a real word interoperability, or must there be more than interoperability? The same round. I will start on the left side.
Start from the left side, that's good. So the junior first. You have more time to think about it. Well, what can I say? If there is a mission abroad, we have the Bundeswehr Operations Command, and that is something where we would contribute with all the enabler capability that I provide, again, IT, intelligence, geo, and so on. If it's about collective defense, then of course we are looking forward to some kind of territorial command, and then there is any kind of NATO or EU command structure. But again, there's a little difference in that, because what I do in this cyber information domain with some kind of CID operations, that will always stay under national command and control. There will be no transfer of authority of any kind of my cyber guys. And that is well accepted amongst all the nation, but it makes it a little bit more complicated with all the processes we have. So whatever is interesting about this kind of operation, it will be under my remit, but we will discuss the process, how to provide that in targeting against potential military environment. Nationally, I think what we require, but I'm pretty sure we all require, are operational guidelines. How do we want to operate together? Because this joint approach, this common approach, this multi-domain approach, that's the challenge of tomorrow. And it's not only about the operational level, also the tactical level. So it's about real-time information flooding around. So I think integrate, synchronize, these are the challenges that we would need. And that is something which is not only national, but also multinational. But I'll leave it with that. Thank you.
Yeah, as I already said, I think the land domain has a long way from the barracks to the forward combat zone. And for me, in the dimension land, I think this is an holistic scenario. As I said, probably the deployment will be already part of the operation. And the good old times where we put together a contingent somewhere in Germany, make it ready, bring it to the deployment pipeline, then have an RSOMI process, and then move to the, how shall I say, to the combat zone is probably an old thinking. From my perspective, and I think we can all agree that there is a conflict or a hybrid scenario already before under the threshold of war, but this environment is completely contested, and I think we have to think in straight lines, as I said, from the barracks to the combat zone, and that's why I'm asking or requesting, keep it simple, stupid. We don't have the chances and opportunities to have long handover, takeover processes, be it national or to NATO. So it has to be organized from the very beginning in the context of an overall operational plan to make it feasible, at least for the land forces, because as I've already described, for us the way to the combat zone is time consuming and is a long distance. Thank you.
Ulrich.
Yeah, talking about interoperability is multidimensional, I would say. First of all, it's a very operational issue. We have to fly together. We have to exercise. We have to use procedures together with the others. And that is much more difficult than you think, because in former times when we had just cross-service, just on a technical basis, it was very easy. We could even do some maintenance on the other aircraft. Today, everything is digital. So what is a digital interoperability, meaning that? So from the operational sphere, we are very quickly then in the digital sphere. If you are talking about interoperability, you have to use links. So what does it mean to have a link connection? Which data is transferred? How is it processed? And how can we bring that together? And finally, I mean, interoperability has to do also, in some cases, with communities. We see, for example, now the F-35 community, which is a closed shop. And I have in mind that possibly we can do the same with FCAS. And finally, we have Tempest. So do we really want to have this interoperability only in communities, divided by space, in a common air warfare? So the necessity is, for me, that we, let's say, keep the track to interconnect each other, although we are developing these communities in the future.
So you mentioned already the Eckpunktepapier of 18 May this year, and I think that well describes the need for two national operational headquarters in the Bundeswehr. One was already mentioned, the Bundeswehr Ops Command, Einsatzführungskommando, dealing with national responsibilities during out-of-area operations, or let's say out-of-Germany operations of the Bundeswehr. But then this Eckpunktepapier clearly describes mission and tasks of a newly to be formed territorial ops command. And I think it is quite right in describing these tasks, and it's clearly shown that these tasks are so, I wouldn't say rocket science, but it's a lot of work to do national plans for territorial defense, harmonize them with NATO plans, with other allies' plans, and all the more harmonize them with the civilian plans in order to implement this necessary whole of government approach. Therefore, I plea for a two-pillar on the operational side, one for operations out of Germany, one for operations within Germany. I think the Eckpunktepapier is good on that.
Admiral Schönbach.
Yeah, coming back to your question, it is, first of all, I'm absolutely along with General Riggs. More or less for Navy is the same. It is interoperability. When I was a young officer, we're always asked when we are in the ops room, what is the most important issue you have? It's communication, communication, and communication. More or less the same today. For us, Navy, it just, and this is in the moment what we're really lacking, and I think this is not really a secret. We're lacking in the moment that we are running into danger having no really third comes communication and networking, of course, same with the interoperability problems we do have with other navies. Other navies have as well. So what we had in the beginning of NATO, really even starting in the 60s, very good in the 70s, perfect and brilliant in the 80s, was more or less 99% interoperable with the others. And then we diverted our developments on communication and interoperability. And now we have to come back. And as the General said, at the end, it's all about effectiveness. And it's effectiveness, in my case, really, and this is a new issue what we have with regard, broad topic is joint fires, that we have to be able to communicate with others, to strike together against a target. And this is something what we need. Of course, we need also the effector, so we need a strike missile, and I think we're on a good way to this. And then really come back, now what makes it really possible? How makes it happen? And this is interoperability and communication. And this is, I think, what we really need, especially in the German Navy, and also combined and joined with the others.
General Vella.
Well, it's a framework situation. I could put up the words of Admiral Daum with nearly everything said, but not by everybody. But let me bring in maybe a very special perspective of the medical service of the Bundeswehr. I think the task or the particular challenge is the parallelism of collective defense on the one hand and the national defense in this whole of government approach, what is really a challenge. And that is parallel nearly the same with the people of Admiral Daum. We have to provide, in addition, 5 days a year, 24/7 hours, the normal medical care for soldiers as basic line. The second one is the second challenge is to meet the different tasks and operational requirements of the three main domains. What means from a quantitative perspective and the region, we have to ensure the movements and of the army. The biggest challenge from my perspective is providing medical service on sea, from sea at land. What is a purely new perspective, not a purely new perspective, but something we have to learn again. The third challenge, having in mind the multinationality again, is to coordinate or to synchronize the different countries who are participating in the medical service. And thus we installed this EMC, or European Medical Command, or the MMCC, just to coordinate the development of capabilities and to have support, in particular on the operational level, for planning medical support in a multinational perspective.
Common and different. And as Admiral Schönbach mentioned, since the 60s, since the 80s, the way in Europe and the way in the NATO perhaps go very different ways. Now we have in the situation in March of the next year and in June of the next year two new strategic documents. The documents of the EU Compass and the document of the NATO. What are your expectations in these documents? What will you have in these documents in the way of we come together or not we go different ways? I start on the left wing.
Okay, me again. That's an excellent question. I understood that is the way you need to qualify that question, though, that you have time to think about the answer. Well, again, cyber and information domain, cyber as a military domain of operation that has been accepted in NATO a few years ago, that's accepted in the EU a few years ago. So we've all established something like that in all the nations, like we did it with cyber and information, other nations focusing on cyber only. Second thing that came up throughout the last years is space, where nations have defined single service, like the US, where others have combined that, like us, with the Air Force and space, together with the cyber information domain, so to say, a common effort. So these are quite new domains that we have implemented, and I hope, and we will work on that, that both the strategic compass and the NATO warfare concept and all that stuff will line out how to integrate these new capabilities, integrate, but also separate and make a common effort out of this. And that's important for me, having been in the US, seeing US Cyber Command, how they play their game. That is something that we need to combine. So I hope we will learn by both these documents that it's relevant and important to work together. And that is, on one hand, inside Europe, on the other hand, with a transatlantic link. So in the cyber information domain, that's most important. I am pretty sure without the US supporting what's going on in the cyber environment, it might be very crucial for us to survive. Thank you.
The land domain.
Yeah, this is really an interesting question, and I'm happy that we just discussed the week before last week the same question in Athens, where a lot of 28 army commanders in Europe sat together and discussed what does this mean for us. And I have to say that, especially in the land domain, this old argument and the aspect of single set of forces, which we have to keep in mind, is especially valid, at least really for land force. I think an airplane can switch from a NATO to an EU operation within 24 hours. And Navy vessels passing through the Mediterranean can one week be part of a European Union operation and the next week of a NATO operation. This is not applicable to land forces. And we have the experience by providing EU battle groups in the same time while we are preparing VJTF commitments or EFP battalions on the NATO side. And there's really, what is missing is in conceptual interoperability, not only a technical interoperability, but a conceptual one. And really, to my pity, and some years ago, I was chairman of the EU NATO capability group. Madame Anou is laughing. And at that time, Jaap de Hoop Scheffer, in a conference here in Berlin, said the famous words: "The last frozen conflict in Europe is a relation between European Union and NATO." This is not true, as we learned, unfortunately, over the last years. But somehow this is still valid. So as long as we are, at least in the land domain, are not capable of organizing conceptual standardization, I'm really very much concerned and looking forward of what's coming up and onto us in those different documents in the upcoming year.
Ulrich.
For nearly, I think, 5 years, I was in the business of harmonization of military requirements inside Europe. And we had those 5 big European nations with us, which was Italy, Spain, France, Great Britain, even Sweden, and ourselves. And we had even some common requirement documents, which were agreed by the capability directors. I found all these capabilities which we developed commonly in EU and NATO, so in the national spectrum of capabilities. So what does it mean? I think, of course, we have a European identity, and that is pretty clear, especially when it comes to burden sharing. And burden sharing is always cash, capabilities, and commitment. That we could, let's say, do more from the European perspective, and especially to become more capable. And if we are looking to the capabilities itself, there are some capabilities which could be put to the front a little bit more. Airborne electronic attack, for example, drones and all that, even the FCAS system. But if we are really in a situation of deterrence, of possibly collective defense, then of course our biggest partner in NATO can't be put at a side, and we shouldn't be independent from the US. We have to connect to each other. And that is, in my opinion, pivotal to the future warfighting if it comes to the sharp end of the armed forces, which we are all standing for.
First of all, I hope that NATO and EU will get their act together, but that is mainly a political question. Germany, being part of both alliances and unions, will contribute militarily to both of them, of course. And the areas where I see we will see more requirement derived from those papers are space, is cyber, is ISTAR, ballistic missile defense, and strategic transport, mainly.
Okay, bit more provocative. Of course, and this, as you said earlier, it is of course a bit stovepiping, because we in our domains are of course so different that that must be the outcome. For me as a Navy, I think there's one thing that is now coming really back. What we thought, probably many people thought, especially we in Germany, where we're always concentrating on the land domain, the coming back of what is NATO in the beginning all about, or was it all about? It was in an alliance of sea powers, and even Germany, we never understood, or never have understood the sea. That's the reason why we failed so many times on that. And now it's coming back, and whether we are, of course, have to concentrate on the cyber, we have to concentrate, of course, on the land. Of course, we should not neglect that. It is, at the end, always about resupply. It is always about reinforcement. And at the moment when we see what is happening right now, and coming back to your question about these documents, and first of all, sir, honestly, it is paperwork. The question is, how can we fill in? We have seen so long, well, close to 40 decades of serving in the armed forces. I've seen so many papers. And the question at the end is, are you really filling it with life? At the end, it comes always again, now what we see with the Russian Navy in the North Atlantic. The submarines are back, the strategic submarines are back, the threat is back, the Chinese are coming. They're always interesting that the frigate Bayern, of course I have to mention it, the frigate Bayern is right now in the Indo-Pacific. Many people have problems with that. Oh my God, do we provoke China? What is NATO saying? What is EU saying? Nobody cares about the Chinese ships and boats are operating in the Baltic Sea. So nobody asks if probably NATO or EU is provoked by that. So coming to the question, I think, first of all, many in allied countries see the compass, so the more EU-led and directed paperwork, seeing not just a strengthening of EU, and I think we're running into danger that probably we're separating more from each other. And especially what the general said before me, so okay, we have to take we're very, very careful that we stay not even linked together. It is not just our biggest ally, it is the security and safety partner number one. And it will be always. We separate from the US, we are lost.
Well, let me come in with a completely different perspective. I think many of the European member states are looking at the German military service with this very special approach on taking care about the healthcare of soldiers as a blueprint. That is what I understand during the discussions I had with several countries during the last months and facing the way we approach the challenges. And there is, if I'm allowed to say so, a very special dimension we have in focus, that is a human being or the individual soldier within the service where we take care for. And let me try to connect this with two wishes. The first is in taking up or picking up a point General Scheller has mentioned before is that we have the chance to overcome our shortfalls, in particular as far as medical services are concerned, maybe hitting this or tracking this multinational approach with a very strong European vision, having maybe a European command in maybe 2030. That would be one of my wishes, overcoming these shortfalls we may have. And I think the second wish is that we can develop these capabilities of the military medical services, maybe with the cure element we have already, although strengthen the European Medical Command as the bridge between NATO and EU medical services, what is one of the key points, I think, to get in the right direction.
Thank you. Yes, what I've understood is politicians like to do paperwork. That is so. That's the reality. No, it's okay. It's so. We must be more acting. We must be more operational. That will be the big point for the future, for the working of the new government. We will see what will happen. But we will go from way ahead from the international position to the national positions. We have in the Eckpunktpapier a very interesting word, and during this conference there were many questions. What is it? The word is Systemhaus. I have to ask, what is in your opinion the conception of a Systemhaus? More operational, more practical, only a concept?
I'm really happy with that question, but the question or the counter question is, how many time do you have for this evening? Because it's really challenging question on the one hand, and it follows the line you already mentioned. we have a common approach, but very different perspective on this, the realization of the system house. I think from the perspective of the medical services, we try to put together things who are really important for us, is what has to do with science and development and research and development in the medical field or the healthcare field, having in mind something, so to speak, what is One Health approach today, bringing that together with procurement and armament, and planning procedures. But it's a very typical approach for the medical service. It's a little bit different, I think, with the other services or the domains or dimension, however you call it. I think we are a little bit similar with cyber and information domain, because the development of technological approaches is as fast as maybe the IT sector, and so we need in future a different approach than we have today, but it's faster, smarter, and has some agility, so to speak.
Admiral Schönbach.
Yeah, putting one thing forward first, the Navy, not because I'm now head of Navy, but we are playing a bit more extraordinary role or special role with the system house, because the other word you never have, not have mentioned so far is Maritime Warfare Center or the Warfare Centers for all services. In our idea or perspective how to run such a system house, this is twofold. The structural question, that means that we bring on the one side all what is maintenance all about. Maintenance underneath the Naval Command. On the other side is our problem when we talk about armament and procurement. We are coming by our processes too late in cooperation or in contact by the procedure, in contact with the industry. So that we are thinking about something what we want to have or which we need to have, of course, derived from the threat assessment, and then we control, we plan, then we have a back and forth communication with the Ministry of Defense and with the procurement agency, the buying in Koblenz, and so on, and then very, very late we come in contact with the industry, and then the industry says, oh my God, this is impossible, this is too expensive, or this doesn't work. So the system house idea in the Navy is we far away from developing tactics or tactical procedures, is thinking how can we bring as early as possible, as early as law and our constitution allows, industry together with us in a team for designing and procuring ships, boats, aircraft, so that it is cost effective, on that we have an easier process really to get all the ships procured. And apart from that, saying so, even if, as I said, you haven't mentioned so far, is what we want to have separate from the system house is the question of tactical, as a tactic, development of tactics. That's the idea behind that. So, but first of all, I'm pro, absolutely. We have this, as I just lined out, happy with that.
I can be fairly short. I think it's a good idea that you bring all protagonists who have a role in building up a military capability, from designing the first concept to bringing up to the war, bring these actors closer together. But I think that we have still a long way to go to fill this Systemhaus phrase with content, because we can develop all kinds of ideas. We need to have a common understanding what we want to achieve, and we have a long way to go still to do that.
General Rix.
Yeah, let me quote the ad from, who has invented it? The Swiss. So I think we were the inventors of that name. So I have to, let's say, explain it a little bit how we came up with these so-called Systemhausgedanke, Systemhaus thought. First of all, what is the goal for that? Because this is most important. And the goal for the Air Force is to have an operational ready and a spiral developed Air Force in the future. These are the three goals. And if you have to combine that, you collect things into it. And from collecting different things, it came out that we needed three pillars in the Systemhaus Luft. And these three pillars are, first of all, that we have this certification issue. So the National Military Aviation Authority, which brings us in a necessity to combine it with our operational thoughts. So this is very closely, let's say, I wouldn't say a takeover, but an integration of the NMAA. Second is of course the in-service support and the responsibility for it. If you take that, you need also a budget, and you should be able to allocate money and to give some procurement into a task. So that means that we are, after that, in favor of let's say, being responsible for the operational readiness of ourselves. And the third element is then the so-called Air Warfare Center. So what is the idea of Air Warfare Center? In our opinion, it is development, testing, and evaluation. So a very technological, practical development of capabilities, and at the same time, possibly very closely to that in time and also in location, is the operational testing and evaluation. And if you bring DT&E and OT&E together, then at the end of a process, which is very short, you have a developed element capability which you can use and which is then already operationally proved for the Air Force. So these three pillars are in a Systemhaus Luft. You could call it different, but that's at least the idea.
General Mais.
Yeah, I think we are very much happy with this idea of the system house, and I would like to remind us all that the system, the word system in this word is dealing with a four dimension, and I think that this is a prerequisite for heading for a system house overarching all services. It's a concentration and organization along the four dimensions which are mentioned in the Eckpunkte paper. We in the Army have a clear understanding of what we are heading for in this system house concept, and to put it blunt, it's pooling and concentrating all functions which are setting the prerequisites and enable the field army, respectively the deployable land forces, to be ready to do their job. And from our perspective, this has three aspects, and the first and absolutely priority aspect we in the Army have to follow is the biggest value we have in the Army are the people in the Army. So the human factor, the development, the education of the human factor, the training of the human factor is one, and I would say the priority pillar of our system house concept. And the second one, and this is what my colleagues already mentioned, is the material readiness factor from the very beginning of defining requirements of land forces material down to its use and to its life cycle management at the end, which is still the contested question, I think. And those two pillars have to be overarched by a concept and doctrine development field, which is the Land Warfare Center in this case, which are putting everything together and at the end of the day, as I already mentioned, creates a prerequisite on which we can train and enhance the readiness of the combat units or the combat forces.
Admiral Dahm.
Yeah, thank you. I think first to say is it's an undefined legal term, the Systemhaus. That's why we have so different interpretations. But everybody is looking into it from his perspective. And I have my own perspective, of course. So it's something I realize that separates in-service support from the original procurement and armaments process. And honestly, that's a red line for me, because in the IT business, to separate armament from IT support and in-service support is a no-go. In-service support, that means to fix what the users has broken, is one part. Avoiding obsolescences and re-engineering, all that stuff is always something of an armaments process. So for me, these two things, in-service support and armament, belong together. And the ideas of bringing responsibility out of the federal office, to name the elephant in the room, to separate something from the Federal Office for Armament and Service Support and IT and bring it back to the service, that is an idea where I'm quite hesitant to accept this. Honestly, I'm even convinced that having the IT service together with the other domains in this federal office is the right way, because my communication equipment needs to be built into tanks, ships, airplanes. So this integration in one office, one federal office, for me is a good idea. On the other hand, I see that there are deficiencies, and these are not with the processes, these are more with the people who live the processes and might stand in their own way in doing so. So there is room for optimization. And what of course I also see, and that's natural, federal office is concentrating on the special contracts that go beyond 25 million euros and need to be brought to the parliament. So they're all concentrating on that work. So when I come with my projects, which are lower in scale, it's only the bits and pieces, it's only the screws that bring the big parts together, then we're always behind. And that's what I see, why we are so late with command and control capability, interoperability, all that stuff. So if there is a way to solve that, then my solution would be that we separate something from the federal office. That might be some entity like the IT Office 2.0 but minus, something like that. So a separation, two organizations, but on that side of armament, on that side beyond the fence between the legal term 87A and 87 Bravo. That would be my entity. And then, to the end, my system house, at least, is a virtual organization. That is the IT office type of entity plus my Center for Digitization and Capability Development. So the demanding side in my hands, the realization side on the other hand, but focusing, concentrating on the portfolio of cyber and IT as we define it. So that's my understanding of what we are aiming for, and honestly, together with the federal office, no line between, so to say, no piece of paper in between the two of us in getting that idea worked out. Thank you.
Now I have a little image in my head. A system house as a roof with different rooms. And these different rooms must combine under this roof, because it's not separating, sondern it's to bring it together in a common sense, in a common aim, in a common strategy. That will be a challenge for the politicians, for our decision, because we must follow the reorganization in our processes to decide in a similar way. That will be a very interesting project to discuss this with all our politicians who are in the committees for not only defense, no, but for budget. There will be a very interesting process. I will see it in the next half a year. I think we must go on the work, also in a politician way, in a political way. Now, we have time for perhaps one question. But we will leave the point of procurement, because we always discuss about every visit in every European country, in the discussion with the NATO parliamentarians, they all have one same problem. The name is, or the right is, what is with the demographic developments. All what we discuss, all what we do, we need the human beings to do this. And I see in all these countries very different ways to solve this problem. How can we recruit people to do this? For perhaps not only young people, but people who knows what they have to do. Also older people, 30 years old, 40 years old. What are your proposals? What can we do to solve this problem? This demographic problem in recruitment. General Bella.
To be as attractive as possible would be the short answer on this question. What is but it's really, that is, I think, the biggest challenge we have to face, in particular in the field of the medical house of the Bundeswehr, facing the shortage of specialist personnel throughout Europe. You see that already every day in this pandemic situation. But just to bring a little bit good news in this point. At the moment, I think what we face that we are, as joint medical service, a really attractive and well-known and visible medical system, military medical system, that is really attractive for young people. Becoming paramedic or medical doctor or pharmacist, as you know it. And I think we have at the moment a real time frame to, on the one hand, to work on our attractiveness as a system, and at the moment I think we have a good relation for candidates being member of the medical service of the Bundeswehr. The prerequisite is that you shape your visibility as a medical system, and you know what is behind this sentence. The other challenge from the democratic perspective is our view on the needs of the services that we have to cope with younger people, that we have to train and maybe and we have to help them to get well-trained soldiers. We did some programs together with the army on this way. Because I think the physical fitness of the future generation differs from the times we have started our career in the Bundeswehr. I could put or add on several points from the medical perspective, but I will end up here because the 5 of the colleagues wouldn't have any chance to say anything.
Just some complimentary remarks, because he's of course all right. I think we shouldn't concentrate to answer this question really just on the service. I think we all have to deal with this. So from my perspective, I would prefer or advise to widen the spectrum. If we look at the advertising, how we advertise people and motivate people to come to the armed forces, I think the path is too narrow. People are coming for money. People are coming for a good workspace. People are coming for, because it's a nice uniform. The people are coming for honor. People are coming for, they want to see the world, and so on and so on. But I think we are too narrow what this comes to advertising, why you're coming. We're still, sometimes when I look at the Navy, sometimes we're still looking at how we advertised in the 80s and 90s. So addressing all these aspects, making it, showing the advantages. It is a issue, no, issue is negative. It is an advantage to say, come on, if you up to captain, 4 stripes captain, you earn in a similar job, earn more in the armed forces than outside. So let's address that. So it is for young people also the question if they have it is more or less a competition between all these branches and other works, fields, saying, okay, if you join the armed forces, my God, you get €1,000 more than in a job just around your corner. It might be, this is just one of many, many others. I think we have to widen it, we have to address it, we have to compete like the others and have to address the people like other companies do as well. And then we can show the advantages, might be an idea. And another thing, last thing, but this is just short and snappy. Why? We all have to deal on to cope with the demographic factor. I think it is, we are living in Europe, and I think Europe is a jewel. It is worth to defend. I just heard it yesterday, and I think it's right. The fact is that young people from outside Germany living here, and that they're given a chance really to access to the armed forces, and at the end they were awarded with the citizenship. That might be an idea.
Very shortly, I think we've come a long way in the past several years in increasing the attractiveness, providing incentives. But one thing we all have to accept, that the young people who were born in 2000 and after are simply different than the ones who were born in 1980 or in 1960. And we must not assess this young generation with our views when we were 20. We have to simply accept that they are different, and as long as they bring the potential and the motivation to contribute to the mission, we should take the time and form them in order to make them useful members of the core.
Ulrich.
Yeah, closely the same idea. However, we had the lowest point of recruitment in the Air Force when our operational readiness was low. So 3 years ago. And it was a pity. Since we have raised the operational readiness of the Eurofighter up to 80%, the recruiting is much easier. So what does it show? You need to have some kind of attractiveness due to a state-of-the-art Air Force or armed forces and operational readiness, so that everybody knows when I join the Air Force and I can fly. So very easily. Beyond that, I'm very much in favor, and that is a very political question or issue, let's say, to give us the opportunity to get in contact to pupils. Because after that they decide which professions they will take. And if they don't have any contact to armed forces, because they are in the barracks or aren't seen, are not on the scene, no longer reforger exercises and so on, then they don't know what we can give them and what opportunities they have. And finally, I see, of course, we should raise our payment. We should invest in new careers, like General Alcella has pointed out, and we should adapt a little bit to what they need and not what we need.
General Mais.
Yeah. Up front, I would like to say that I'm rather content with the personnel situation in the army, and especially when you look into the combat units, it's surprisingly how many young people really want to be a tanker or an infantryman. The challenge in the army lies especially with specialists, IT personnel, logistical personnel. So this is the challenge, because we are in competition with the civilian market as well. What I think is that we all have to make better use of the human potential which is ready to serve our country from the very beginning. And I think it was already mentioned, what we need are more flexible career paths within the military arena, but also between the military and the civilian arena of the Bundeswehr. So it should be much easier to switch from a career in uniform to a civil career. And I fully agree to what General Scheller said. We have to take the young people as they are and then develop them to where we need them. And those requirements are obvious in the army. We need robust and resilient personnel to walk the last 100 meters. And but let me add one point in this context. When we have to accept that we have obviously a demographic limit in our country concerning the potential for uniform personnel, then from my perspective, this requires to focus soldiers to functions which only soldiers can do. And the higher the pressure will be increased on the personal strengths of the armed forces, the higher will be the need to focus. Thank you.
Admiral Daum.
Yeah, thanks. What can I add as value for the discussion? I think in my sector, in my arena, there's again some kind of a difference, because what we do is to some extent required to be done in uniform, but on the other hand there's a lot of work that can also be done by civilian personnel and could be personnel that joins us from the outside. So if you're talking about system administrators in networks, in computer centers, they are doing something outside what we are doing inside. There's even a special value for the outsiders, because what we do, carefully speaking about cyber operations, what they could do in our area, they can do it. If they do it outside, they come into jail or prison. So there are people that love to do some jobs, and we can offer them the opportunity. So there are some special situations, again, in the CIDS. I think what we require is is a strategy from recruitment to retirement, a continuous process that we need to think of people that join us early, people that join us at a later stage, people that leave and may return 20 years later after having been in industry. So every button that's on that piano, we need to push it in order to make best value out of any kind of interest. And of course we have to attract that interest. We have to attract that interest also inside. So the war of talents is not only with the outside world, to some extent it's also in the inside world. If we have a platoon commander that has a master in computer science, he might leave the armed forces after having fun as a platoon commander, because he has a vision that now he needs to go to industry. We need to offer him that there is a new service which is exactly concentrating on that. So the internal movement has to be discussed. And I have a lot of people that just say, I like to work in the armed forces, but for a military guy, the part of work-life balance is not properly, but I see on the civilian side of the house that works. So they want to transfer, so to say, in an inner path, and we need to make this more open. And then of course we need to think out of the box. We need to make best use of people from the outside that want to join us as a reserve. They can work so much in our arena. We should use that. If it doesn't fit, we need to talk about public-private partnership. So there are areas in my workload that we have just substituted by the BWI. They provide the service inside my computer center, and they are doing that as well somewhere in theater. So there are potential possibilities to use that. So a broad approach, every button that you can find, we need to at least push it in order to hear if the sound works. That's what I'm pleading for.
The same as some topics before. Common challenge, but different answers and different ways to go. Now I have the sign from General Wolski, and in the end we don't single something, but I say thank you very much for this very interesting round.
Admiral Generals, Congress President Wolfgang Hellmich, if I may say so, this tour d'horizon about the way ahead in capability development and other aspects was almost utmost fascinating. I thank you all for that forward-looking and joint approach in these discussions. And as a token of our gratitude, I would like to hand out the new book about Dr. Pöttering. You might get a signature. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Excellencies, members of Parliament, ladies, gentlemen, generals, admirals, we have to come to the end of the